Hi again, everybody, and welcome to the Let's Reign podcast, where we go in depth with UC athletes, coaches, and administrators. I'm your host, Dan Hoard. We have to go in depth with our guest on this episode because there's a lot going on in his world, and I'm speaking of UC Athletic Director John Cunningham. Let's start with the recent game-changing news, and that is the opening of the Shakely Indoor Practice Facility and Performance Center. Did you anger your fellow ADs around the country who now feel the need to have something similar?
You know, there is always a little bit of jealousy when somebody opens up something nice. And I actually got a lot of nice notes and acknowledgement from a lot of people across the board, from the conference office to ADs within the conference. And you know, it's just something that we needed. It's obviously top notch. I said, you know, during the opening, I said, it's not just Big 12 level good, it's national level good. And so, you know, I think, you know, when you open something like that, it means a lot to obviously us here, but it tells a story nationally that we're in this to go get it. And so that was, I'm sure, sort of the feeling of the other ADs.
I use the term game changing. How does it make a difference specifically in football?
Yeah, I mean, it's multi-leveled in terms of the difference that it makes. Number one, you look at the recruiting piece. I mean, obviously, you know, if you talk to Zach Grant and our recruiting office and the coaches, they'll tell you it's already made a big difference because they've been able the last couple of months to actually take recruits through there. And you start getting in conversations that you couldn't get in previously. And you start flipping some minds and thoughts about, you know, again, sort of what is the perception of Bearcat football. And it's going to be at the very highest level, and we're going to try to win championships. And so that's the mindset change that happens when you open a facility like that. That's one level. The other thing is just the efficiency of the building and what it does to you know, your coaching staff and your student athletes that put all this time into this venture of college football. And when you make it more efficient and you make it easier for people, it has a big impact. And then I think just, you know, when you think of Aaron Himmler and you think of Nico in the strength conditioning unit, when you have the very best of the best, you can get a lot done and make sure that your student athletes are well taken care of in terms of their strength and their training. Rehab, nutrition obviously was another piece to it. So I could go on and on, but it's certainly multifaceted in terms of what it does to your overall athletics department.
Football obviously benefits with the practice field, offices, locker room, weight room, meeting rooms, etc. What about the other sports?
Yeah, that's the other thing I've been saying all along, is that it's not just a football building. I got to be careful, and we have to be careful to recognize that, because if you think of, you know, when we had the bubble several years ago, going up and down for years, we had the bubble and used it for all of our sports. You know, anytime weather came in, we were putting sports in there. Lacrosse, women's lacrosse in there. Certainly soccer will benefit from it in the fall. But even teams that you wouldn't necessarily think of, you know, women's tennis, something like that, they may get in there and just run a little bit, or track may run a little bit in there. In baseball, obviously, we put the nets in there for baseball. Coach Bishel really believes in netting, and the way he kind of approaches hitting, he really wanted that unit put in there, and so we were able to put that in there after we hired Coach Bishel, put it into the plans. So obviously using that for protection from weather, but then the nutrition center is the other piece where you think, you know, what do big time programs have? They have a place where you can fuel your student athletes and feed them the right way, and then all the things that come with that when you get your entire athletics department, coaches, student athletes together a lot, breaking bread, having meals together. You build that camaraderie. We talk about one team. That's Cincinnati, one team. We've been talking about that for years within the athletics department. This nutrition center is going to help with the one team mantra more than anything else.
I almost hate to ask this question days after you opened a new $134 million facility, but looking down the road, not anytime soon, but do you think you will eventually have to build something similar for basketball?
I don't know. You know, I think that's to be determined. You know, obviously we redid our locker room spaces and did that really, really well to the highest level. Both men's and women's basketball locker rooms recently redid those. And so we're in good shape there. Obviously the Fifth Third renovation that we did, you know, both coaches, Katrina and Wes, like to practice in Fifth Third. They like to get the I think it's a great facility, obviously, but they like to get the use of that facility for practice, for shooting, and all those things. And so, do you do something else in basketball? I'm not sure. It would certainly be down the line, but we're also always going to try to compete at the highest level in men's and women's basketball. So we'll be monitoring the situation.
All right, let's turn to some recent on-the-field success, beginning with baseball. The baseball team won 33 games, earned an at-large bid to the NCAA tournament for the first time since the 1970s. You hired Jordan Bischel a couple of years ago. What did you see that led to him being the choice? I'm bumping into my mic here. And has this turnaround come even faster than you anticipated?
What did we see in Jordan? At the time, he was so thoughtful with his answers, and I always go back to a few questions I had, and his breakdown of the team, of how he would recruit to Cincinnati baseball. It was very specific to Cincinnati baseball, and I remember him. He's from Green Bay, Wisconsin, obviously coached up north, and I remember him talking about the ability to get kids in Michigan, Illinois, Indiana, obviously Ohio, to start thinking about coming down. They consider Cincinnati south. And, without having to go all the way into SEC country, there's so many great players. Pennsylvania, you'd add them in. There's so many great players in the north. And his point was that if you could make Cincinnati a destination for those types of student athletes, prospective student athletes, you could really do something special. And so I love that vision. He's an accountant by trade, and so everything he did and everything he presented was very detailed. And I thought, okay, he's thinking in a different way, and that's kind of how he plays. With the advancement of runners and bunting, and just how he thinks about the game is a little bit different and unique. And so that's what I loved about him. That's why we hired him. The turnaround has happened more quickly than you think it would. I mean, to step into the Big 12 conference, coming from the American, the Big 12 baseball conference is so strong, and traditional powerhouses, and then to be able to go out there, and I think we won maybe 6 of our last 7 series this year in baseball in the Big 12. That's hard to do, and that just speaks to the type of culture he's been able to build quickly, and the type of baseball he plays is really tough to play against a Jordan Bischel baseball team.
The Major League Baseball draft is about a month away. We'll have our eyes on Carrington Cross after his incredible year, Big 12 Player of the Year, first-team All-American, and an incredible story with the engineering co-op that he did over the summer, getting up at 3 a.m. and working until 11:30 before training and lifting and things like that. Is he a program-changing recruit? Is he one of those guys?
Certainly, and I think for all the intangible things, obviously, every time he was up to bat, I thought he was going to get a hit, and then that you think of those players that are like that. I'm sure Pete Rose back in the day was that, right? You just think he's going to get a hit, which is really unique. But it's the intangible things, the leadership. He does things the right way on the field, off the field. I loved telling the story about his year during one of my meetings with the president, because I got to the end and I said, I know the thing you're going to like the most about Carrington Cross is he was a chemical engineer, and that's what Dr. Pinto is. And so it's just so impressive to be able to do that. It's a true student athlete, mentality, and the way he approached his time here is special. I said it before, he's a Hall of Famer. He's one of our best ever in terms of baseball here at Cincinnati.
The NCAA Outdoor Track and Field Championships ended 2 days ago. Cincinnati made school history with 5 All-Americans. What accounts for this growth in the track and field program? Is it being in the Big 12? Is it something else?
I think it's a combination, of a lot of things, but give a lot of credit to Susan Seaton, her staff. We certainly have become sort of throwing you. I mean, we have our field events. I should say field events because it's not just the throwers, but our field events are really, really strong right now, competing at a national level, and that's been really important to some of the things that we've been able to do. But just across the board, we've also been able to find some really good transfers in our sprints and in our long distance. And I think they've just been really smart about how they recruited recently. Certainly the Big 12 has helped, and I think that will just continue to help as we advance. We got to remember we're only 2 years into a cycle of recruiting into the Big 12. It's going to get better and better, and love what the track and field program has done this year. One of the all-time best years in our track and field program history.
Speaking of recruiting, the men's and women's basketball teams have started their off-season training. Wes Miller brings a McDonald's All-American in, along with a top 20 transfer class led by Mustafa Cham, who looks to me like a first-round draft pick someday. Katrina Merriweather's got the best recruiting class in school history. Another McDonald's All-American, 3 top 100 recruits. What are your hopes and expectations for basketball this year?
Yeah, I mean, I think you just go, you look at the two programs separately, because I always do, and I think Wes Miller's program, from the time that we lost in the Big 12 championship until now, to do what he did in the transfer portal, and to have an understanding of, okay, these are things that we really need to do differently to compete in the Big 12 at the highest level. We need to change the mix this way, and that transfer portal is brutal, and it's hard. It's a grind. And you got to go out there and really attack it. And Coach Miller did that, and his staff did that. And I give them a lot of credit. They weren't sleeping much. They went straight from a long season right into a time period that they would probably call their busiest time period, and just didn't stop and just attacked it. And so from that time that we lost to Iowa State in the Big 12 tournament, until now, to do what they've done is really remarkable in my eyes. And I think that we have a top level talented team. And so now it's just about, putting those pieces together and getting that leadership and finding that right mix. And that's what Coach Miller is going to be focused in on. And then you look at what Katrina's doing, building it from the base, right? Building it through freshmen really is kind of been her approach. Now, she did go out in the portal and found some key pieces, which is going to be important to that program. But so excited to have this freshman class coming in, a big freshman class that includes 2, top 30 players and a lot of other really high level players coming in. And then you mix in your veterans like, Reagan and some others that are coming back to be leaders on that team, and then a couple of transfers. So excited about where that goes. But I think that she's really building it from the ground up, and she knows it might take some time with a young team, but you never know. So it should be exciting to see both of those programs, this late fall into winter.
Let me follow up on Wes. Last year was obviously a disappointing one. The expectations were high. They got off to a great start, and then they started poorly once Big 12 play came around and didn't make the NCAA tournament. What advice or support have you given him in hopes of him making the NCAA tournament here in year 5?
Yeah, I mean, he's head coach for a long time. He was a head coach for a long time at Greensboro, and then obviously had been here a few years. And so I don't need to give him a lot of advice. I mean, he has mentors that walk him through tough years, Coach Williams and others that can walk him through some of those things. And so I don't know if it's advice as much as support, and just letting him know that I believe in him, I believe in his staff, I believe in this program and what he's about and how he approaches it. Again, he's nonstop, and the effort's always going to be there, and he's going to figure out the right mix and the right players to play in this position or that position. And so I'm very confident in Coach Miller. And so maybe more than anything, it was just me expressing my confidence in him. But he's going to get it done. And I just believe in him all the way through.
Let's turn to the big news in college sports, and that is the recent House settlement that paves the way for schools to directly pay their athletes up to $20.5 million here in year 1. Does this level the playing field at all?
I hope it does. I think everybody involved in college athletics is going to be hopeful that this levels the playing field, that this creates some parameters. I always say you want to know the game that you're playing. And so I believe that it creates transparency, right? We're going to understand everybody has, the same cap, this $20.5 million in the first year that will rise over years. So you kind of know that there's a cap in place, and then you also know that anything outside this cap is going to have to go through a process of review, and that's this NIL Go clearinghouse that will look at all NIL deals that are not institutional NIL deals. So the cap involves the institution contracting with the student athlete for their NIL. And then anything outside of the cap, outside of the institutional NIL deals, will go through a process, and that process will review it to make sure that it's, actually has a business purpose, number one. And then it's within a range of compensation that would make sense for that deal. And then there's some transparency and some, they call it attestation behind that, which means that the student athlete actually has to attest to the deal. And then the payor, the company that's doing the deal with the student athlete, would have to attest to that deal. So a lot of work being done. Deloitte has been a tremendous partner in helping shape that NIL Go. So, an accounting firm that's going to do this review. And so all those things sort of in place, very hopeful that it all comes together and works well, and that we do create a more even playing field. And again, we all know the game that we're playing, and then we can compete at the highest level.
Where does the $20.5 million come from?
Yes, I mean, it's difficult, and it's hard on every institution. Well, no matter what conference you're in, if you're going to compete and try to do a full share, a full 20.5, you're going to have to pull from a few different areas. For us, we're in a unique position because the last 2 years, as we joined the Big 12, we were a half share of revenue the first 2 years. And so last year, we were a half share in the Big 12. Fortunately for us, this year is our full share year. So we jump up, approximately $17 million this year in television revenue. And so we're able to take that and put it toward our revenue share. And then outside of that, we're going to have to fundraise. That's the impact fund that we've set up. We're going to have to go find, go to our donors and find some additional dollars. Look at our expenses, always looking at expenses to make sure that we're not overspending in any way. And then just be smart about it. But we want to compete at the highest level. I'm very thankful to our university for their support because we couldn't do it without them. But certainly I'm thankful to our donors too, because we've utilized our donors to support us through this strange transitional time in college athletics. And we're going to attack that donor base again. And it's their program. I always say that they want us to be successful. And in this model of college athletics, this is how we're going to be successful.
It can be confusing for donors because there are different things that they've given to in the past or being asked to give to now. UCAT, Cincy Reigns, the Impact Fund. Is there a priority from your perspective? Does it ultimately go to the same place? How does that work?
I think that's another nice thing about the change from going, bringing NIL contracts within the institution and having this cap is that we can now operate as really one bucket. And so we're asking our donors obviously to give to the Impact Fund, which is going to be specifically about helping us cover that gap in terms of NIL, institutional NIL. But we're also asking our donors for help just in all the other things that we do. Because again, our expenses are our expenses and our revenues are our revenues. And now that there's some control around this, we can adjust things and move some things and make it work. But we need a lot of support. We have 350,000 alumni. We need people to support this program at a really high level. And if we can start tapping into the masses, we can be very, very successful because of who we are and the success that we've had in the past and the passionate fan base that we have.
What happens to Cincy Reigns?
Cincy Reigns continues to exist. We're still, we're talking to them about what their role will be. But certainly the dollars that were raised behind Cincy Reigns are going to be moving in-house. And so when we talk about the Impact Fund, that was the Cincy Reigns Fund. And the good thing about donating to the Impact Fund that was a little bit more complicated with Cincy Reigns is when you donate to the Impact Fund, you're donating to UCATS. You're getting UCATS points. It's a donation that's tax deductible through our foundation. And so it's like all the other donations that have happened in the past. So it becomes a little bit more simpler now that we've moved it in-house. But again, Cincy Reigns has great IP, great people behind it. Brian Fox, Ken Tracy, many, many others that helped along the way to set that up and get that thing up and running. So very thankful for them. And they will have a role. Obviously, Cincy Light still runs through Cincy Reigns. So there's a marketing role, there's some IP behind it, there's just a support that we feel like Cincy Reigns can still have for us, and we're working through that right now.
The $20.5 million in revenue sharing gets divvied up among all your sports. How have you come up with a formula to determine how much goes to each?
Yeah, so I think kind of twofold there, largely based on the revenues of the programs. And so that was kind of the first marker that we look at. And then another one is just looking at what the Big 12 is doing. And so it's a little bit of making sure that we're putting our resources in the appropriate places to be successful in the Big 12. And so that's another piece to it. But, I think the other thing is we came up with a concept for the first year. That doesn't mean that's how it's going to be going forward. There's movement that might happen based on, where resources are going in the Big 12 and nationally. But also looking at the revenues of our programs is really important to us too.
As an AD, do you worry about friction that could come about from this program gets this amount, this program gets that amount?
Yes, but there's always been that. Yeah, there's only so much oxygen in the room, and so we understand that, and that's always been a little bit of the dynamic of college athletics. We have 18 sports that we're supporting, and we try to focus in on supporting student athletes and the student athlete experience first above everything else, and then we kind of go from there. But we also understand that again we're here to compete in the Big 12, and we got to resource our programs appropriately to do that.
Cincinnati was honored last year for having the best institutional NIL program in the country. What has Cincinnati done well?
A couple things. It's number one, we've got great people around it. Eddie Taylor, Trevor Wright, others that have really dove into that space. I would put Cincy Reigns in there too. They really were very helpful in the formation of sort of our approach to the true NIL. The real putting your student athletes out there in the public and having them sponsor and promote businesses. That's what we've been so good at. So that's number one, is we've been working with local businesses, trying to get our student athletes out there, trying to support them in their in their pursuits. A lot of them don't have a lot of time, but we got to work around that to make sure that they have an opportunity to again, get out there in the public and utilize their name, image, and likeness to make a little bit of money, but also just learn how to do business. That's the other thing that I think we've done really well, is we put student athletes in a position where they've had to deal with CEOs and CFOs and marketing people, and learn how business works. And that's been really important. And I think that's the other aspect, is we've really done a nice job with the education piece around NIL, talking to our student athletes about that, and then also helping them set up LLCs, their personal LLCs. We've done that probably at a higher level than others, and then working on some of the things around taxes and making sure that we button all that up. They're having to grow up quickly as college student athletes, and they got to think of themselves as a brand, think of themselves as a business, and that's probably what we've done better than others. And I give a lot of credit to our people.
Football season tickets are currently on sale, and you've gone to great lengths to try to improve the fan experience, not only in football, but basketball and all of the programs here at UC. One of the things you've done is become the first college program to partner with Lava AI, which is a company that a lot of NBA, NFL teams, NHL teams, et cetera, have worked with. Do you have any tangible examples of what AI can do to improve the fan experience?
Wow, you're pulling me into places that I'm not that familiar with. I wish Anthony DeFino or Sidney Shelton were sitting here. I have really, really smart, or Ben Hofstetter. I have really, really smart people around our athletics department that keep informing me about AI and talking to me about it, what it can do. But Lava is a really interesting one for us. It's gonna have the ability to push discounts into our ticket app. It's gonna have the ability to do some in-game things that we haven't been able to do before. They had a great presentation. They've worked with some really interesting groups and professional teams and things like that. They haven't been in the college space. And so I give credit again to our really smart young people that are working with Lava and trying to find some new ways that we can really structure a great fan experience and do it digitally. We know that it's one of the reasons we made a shift in our ticketing platform. We think that there's some things that we can do around our app, around our website, and around our ticketing platform that can be cutting edge. And always important to look at that with our fan base. We have a very sophisticated pro market fan base, and so we've got to adapt to them. And I think we're starting to do that in a really high level. And one of the things we look to do this going into this season specifically is we change some roles in our department to set up a fan experience group, and it's Anthony DeFino and Sydney Shelton will oversee this group. And really, it's just thinking about the fan experience every day. I went to the Savannah Bananas game this last weekend, and obviously what they do is amazing. But you start thinking about the thing they do so well is they obsess over their customers, and so that's one thing that we talk about. We want to keep innovating and think about ways to make our fan experience better.
You're also taking sponsorships in-house with the formation of Cincy Sports Partners, led by my former Bengals colleague Ryan Holmes. Is this to increase revenue? And how confident are you that it's going to be successful?
It's absolutely to increase revenue, but it's also to have just a little bit more control over all things related to our program. So when forever, a lot of colleges have outsourced their multimedia rights, which is their advertising sales around their programs. And we just felt like, the pro model is more about having full control over all of your multimedia rights. And we saw a few schools that jumped out and did that, not very many, but we're going to join the ranks of the few and control our own destiny when it comes to our advertising and the way that we can promote our sports through that. But certainly the revenue piece was a big part of it. When you control it, you also control the P&L, and we think that there's a lot of growth that can be had on the revenue side. And so we're going to be very aggressive there and keep growing it. But Ryan Holmes has gone out. It's a startup for us. We had to start it up. So he's gone out and hired a great team. We've got great support from our general counsel to do all the legal things behind that you have to do to make this work. And so it's been a fun project for us. And I think the revenue is going to really jump and going to continue to rise.
With the House settlement and NIL go, do you feel like you've hit a period of relative stability in college sports? It's probably hard to say with legal challenges and everything else, but do you feel like it's at least a little more stable than it's been?
I hope so. I pause there, dramatic pause, because we just have, I took over in at the beginning part of 2020, and nothing has been stable. And so you sort of just become used to it not being stable, and you assume that there's just going to be something around the corner that maybe we're not anticipating. And so I think that's one of the things that I think this role, you have to always be just nimble enough to take on whatever comes your way. I think the House case is going to provide some framework, and now we've got to build around that framework as an institution, obviously, but then as an industry, we got to build around that framework. And to be honest with you, we've got to reestablish, reengage, and recommit to compliance. And that's going to be something that I think we all have to do. And as ADs, we talk about it. As conferences, we talk about that. And so that's that new, we have a new commission that's going to oversee college athletics. And I'm a believer in, if we all engage the right way and believe in it, that it can work. But we all have to do that. It can't just be one institution or one conference. We all have to do it. So I'm hopeful. I think that creates stability, and I'm hopeful is the word.
We started with the Shakely Indoor Practice Facility and Performance Center. Let me end on that topic. Can you describe the feeling of driving onto campus every day on Corey Boulevard and seeing that, and just what that makes you feel as you begin your workday?
Yeah, it feels like growth, and it feels like we're getting our feet underneath us in the Big 12 conference, because that's the type of facility that the Big 12 has had. That's the type of facility Power 5 conferences have had. And so when that started going up, it just felt like this is us taking that next step. And the other thing I thought of a lot was just the workers on that building. I mean, to see them every day out there, working hard to build something that special, and the construction, obviously everybody that was involved in construction, but the designers and the architects, and just how amazing it is when those things all come together. And you get to build something really, really special that's going to have impact on our athletics department and therefore on our university for decades. It was absolutely awesome.
We've covered a lot of ground. I appreciate your time.
Always. Thank you, Dan.
All right. That is Athletic Director John Cunningham. Thanks again for checking out the Let's Rain podcast. And if you have a minute, don't forget to like, rate, and subscribe. Oh, and keep your eyes open for future episodes.